The first sound was not the creak of the rotting door, nor the groan of wood that had been left to die for decades. It was a whisper that did not belong to the wind. Jacob Miller, a farmer whose hands were more calloused than his words, stood at the threshold of a forgotten house at the edge of his barren fields. The world had taken much from him, his crops to drought, his strength to labor, his nights to worry. Yet here he stood, staring into a ruin that no man had entered for years, feeling a chill that ran deeper than the evening air. The house had been abandoned longer than Jacob had been alive. The elders of the county spoke of it in half-sentences, as if finishing the thought would invite misfortune. Children dared one another to run up to its porch and touch the peeling frame. None ever dared to stay. But Jacob was not a child. He was a desperate man. Hunger sharpens courage, and debt dulls fear. His last harvest had failed. His wife had taken ill. His faith was steady, but even faith trembles when the pantry is bare. So when he saw the house on his walk home from town, a dark shape against the setting sun, a place everyone avoided, he did not turn away. Something in him whispered louder than the wind, "Go inside." He pressed his hand against the door. The wood was cold, damp with the scent of mildew and years of silence. The hinges resisted, shrieking like some wounded animal as he pushed. Dust rolled out like smoke, and the dim light of evening spilled into a hollow room. The air was heavy, thick with the smell of rot and something else. Iron, sharp, almost metallic. Jacob's boots echoed on the warped floorboards. Every step seemed to disturb memories that were better left untouched. The walls bore stains, not of paint peeling, but darker, irregular blotches. He forced himself not to think about what had caused them. His lantern, old and dim, cast trembling shadows. The beams crawled over broken furniture, shattered glass, and a staircase that seemed to sag with secrets. Jacob knew he should leave. The land was cursed, people said. Some misfortune had swallowed the family who once lived there whole, leaving nothing but silence. But then he heard it again, the whisper. This time, clearer. Not words, not a voice he recognized, but a beckoning, a pull. It came from beneath his feet. The floor groaned as he shifted his weight. He crouched low, running his hand over the splintered boards. One plank was loose, misaligned. His heartbeat quickened. Farmers know the language of wood and soil, of what is natural and what is not. This was not natural. He pried the board up with his calloused hands. Beneath it, darkness, a hollow space. And in that hollow, something glimmered, not with the shine of coin, but with the pale reflection of his lantern's weak flame. Jacob's breath caught. He reached down, fingers brushing against cold iron. It was a handle, a hidden door. The whisper grew louder, not in his ears, but in his chest. A pull that was not his own, yet felt inseparable from his blood. His lantern shook in his grip as he pulled harder on the iron. With a sharp scrape, the hidden hatch gave way, revealing a passage that led beneath the house. Air rushed up from the depths, stale, colder than the night, carrying with it the weight of secrets buried long before Jacob was born. He froze at the edge, staring into the black. His pulse thundered in his ears. His first thought was fear. His second, temptation. What lay below could be the ruin of him, or the salvation. Jacob Miller, the poor farmer, had broken into an abandoned house, but what he had truly broken into was a story that would alter the course of his life forever. Because beneath that ruined house was a secret passage, and secrets have a way of demanding to be found. Jacob Miller had never known the taste of ease. His life was a patchwork sewn from hunger and hope, stitched together with sweat that soaked his shirt each dawn. He was the son of a farmer, grandson of a farmer, and in his blood ran the stubbornness of generations who had bent their backs to the same raw earth of rural Arkansas. The land was unyielding, baked by sun and wind, and Jacob carried the weight of that soil in his bones. Each morning began before the rooster's cry. He rose in silence, boots worn thin, and walked into the brittle fields that stretched like a graveyard around his home. His wife, Mary, once sang hymns at dawn, her voice floating across the farm like a gentle breeze. Now she lay still, frail as parchment, her breath shallow. The doctor had come twice, muttering of medicine Jacob could never afford. He left only a bill that Jacob tucked under a pile of unanswered debts. Collectors came more faithfully than healers. They arrived in polished wagons, with sharp suits and sharper words, scratching numbers onto papers that weighed heavier than stone. Jacob stood at the door each time, hat in hand, answering with the same weary line, "I'll pay when I can." They never believed him. Truth was, neither did he. The drought stretched into its third brutal year. Fields that once shimmered with wheat cracked open like old leather. Cattle wasted away to skin and bone, their dull eyes reflecting Jacob's despair. The sky withheld rain, and with every empty cloud, Jacob's hope withered. Yet each night he knelt beside Mary's bed, his calloused hands folded in prayer, whispering to the rafters for a mercy that never seemed to come. Still, every dawn he rose. Still, he plowed soil too dry to yield, carried buckets of muddy water from the creek a mile away, scattered seeds that turned to dust in the wind. Stubbornness kept him moving when faith faltered. It was during one of those evenings, the sun bleeding red into the horizon, that Jacob noticed the abandoned house again. It sat at the far edge of the county road, crouched in shadow, windows staring like hollow eyes. Locals avoided it as if it carried plague. Some swore it was haunted. Others swore it was cursed. Children dared each other to touch its porch, but none lingered. The Holloway house, they called it. No family had lived there in 40 years. Jacob had always passed it by, too burdened to care about ghost tales. Hunger haunted his table. Sickness cursed his wife. What were shadows compared to that? But that night, his feet slowed. He stood at the gate staring at the ruin. The air seemed to thicken, as though the house itself had been waiting. Perhaps it was exhaustion, perhaps delirium, or perhaps, as Jacob would later believe, it was destiny whispering his name. He pushed through the overgrown yard, grass tugging at his boots. The porch sagged beneath his weight, groaning like something alive. His chest tightened, but not from fear alone, from hope. Not the gentle kind born of prayer, but the sharp, reckless hope that comes when a man has nothing left to lose. Inside, ruin reigned. Dust hung in the air like smoke. Floorboards moaned. The smell of rot clung to every surface. But beneath the decay, Jacob felt it. A pull, faint but undeniable. A whisper. A hollow place waiting beneath the boards. Yet before we follow Jacob further into that darkness, before we see what lies beneath, I must pause. Because stories like this are more than just tales of men stumbling into mystery. They are reminders that even in the blackest night, when faith flickers like a dying candle, life can twist in ways we never imagined. The abandoned can become the doorway. The forgotten can become the key. And if you're here listening, it means curiosity has already pulled you closer, just as it pulled Jacob. That makes you part of this journey. So I'll ask you, stay with this story. If you believe that hope can rise from the most unlikely places, take a moment now to subscribe to this channel. You won't miss the next secret hidden in the shadows. And while you're here, leave a comment below. Tell me where you are watching from. Just as Jacob's path begins in a forgotten corner of America, your story begins where you are. Together, these stories weave something greater than one man's struggle. Because Jacob's journey is not just about a poor farmer. It is about all of us. Those who hunger, those who wait, those who cling to faith even when the harvest fails. When Jacob pried up that floorboard, when his hand touched the iron handle that opened into blackness, he had no idea what awaited. He only knew this. His life was broken, his faith was worn thin, and yet something in him whispered to take the step. That is where we find him now, lantern in hand, sweat dripping down his brow, standing on the edge of a passage carved in stone, hidden beneath a house long abandoned. The question is not whether Jacob will descend. The question is, what waits for him when he does? The darkness beneath the rotting floor stared back at Jacob Miller like the eye of a beast. His lantern trembled in his grip, its weak flame flickering against the edges of the hatch. The iron handle was colder than stone, as though it had been waiting centuries for a hand to grasp it. Jacob leaned closer. The whisper came again, not through the air but through his chest, pressing inward like a heartbeat that was not his own. He had known the howl of the wind, the creak of barns, the snap of brittle branches in winter. But this was no sound born of earth or sky. This was something other. His first instinct was to close the hatch and walk away, to nail the board back, cover it with dust, and pretend he had never heard the call. But then Mary's pale face surfaced in his mind, the rasp of her breathing echoing in his memory, his children's empty bowls, his debts like stones crushing his back. Perhaps in this cursed place, something waited that could change their fate. He lowered the lantern into the hole. The light spilled onto a staircase, narrow and steep. carved from stone slick with dampness. The steps descended into the belly of the earth, each one swallowing the glow until only blackness remained. Jacob's breath caught. The air that drifted up was sharp with iron, tinged with the sour rot of years. His chest tightened as unease gnawed at him. What sort of place lay hidden beneath a farmhouse? He crouched, running a hand across the splintered floor. The wood seemed to hum faintly, alive with the secret it concealed. He whispered a prayer, broken and trembling. "Lord, guide me." Then he stepped onto the first stair. The stone groaned under his weight. The second stair was slick, nearly taking his balance. The third forced him to brace against the wall, rough and damp beneath his palm. His lantern sputtered in the stale air, coughing smoke as though reluctant to follow him down. At the base of the stairwell, the ground leveled into a tunnel. Jacob lifted the lantern higher. Carved stone walls stretched ahead, etched with strange markings. Symbols he could not read. Circles interlaced with jagged lines, like maps of another world. The grooves shimmered faintly, as though remembering an old light. His boots crunched on gravel as he pressed forward. The tunnel curved, leading him deeper. The air grew colder, heavy with the metallic tang of blood and something sweeter that made his stomach turn. The whisper guided him not with words but with pull, like a hand on his spine. Then he saw it. A chest, half-rotted, crouched at the end of the passage. Its lid was cracked, its iron bindings corroded, yet it seemed alive with weight. Dust clung to its edges as though centuries had guarded it. Jacob knelt, lantern spilling golden light across the damp floor. The chest bore carvings like the walls, deep grooves, sharp lines, letters from a language lost to time. His breath quickened. He pressed his hand against the lid, rough wood biting his skin. It resisted. Hinges screamed. Dust billowed, stinging his eyes. He strained harder until with a violent snap the chest gave way. Inside, not gold, not silver, not jewels. Bones. Small bones. Jacob staggered back, bile rising in his throat. His lantern clattered against the stone, nearly extinguishing. His chest heaved as he saw the truth. Children's bones. Skulls no larger than his palm. Fragile ribs like broken cages. A pile of innocence turned to dust. His mind reeled. What horror had this house swallowed? His hands shook, his breath ragged, every instinct screaming to run. But before he could flee, something shifted in the pile. Jacob froze. His eyes locked on a faint light shimmering between the bones. At first he thought it was a trick of his lantern, but the glow pulsed alive, brighter with each beat. It came from a shard, a crystal, jagged and pale, wedged deep among the remains. The whisper thundered in Jacob's chest now. Not language, not words. Just a single command. Take it. His hand moved before his will. Trembling, he reached into the chest, bones rattling beneath his touch. His fingers closed around the shard. It was cold, so cold it burned. The instant he lifted it, the chamber transformed. The air vibrated. The walls hummed. The markings along the stone ignited faintly, like fireflies trembling to life. The bones collapsed, lifeless once more, as though the shard had been their pulse. Jacob staggered back, clutching the crystal to his chest. Its glow spilled white light across the tunnel, brighter than the lantern burning against his skin. For a moment, silence. And then, a voice. Not the whisper, not a sound in his ears, but a voice in his soul. Deep, ancient, clear. You have found what was hidden. You have touched what was buried. And now, farmer, your life will never be the same. Jacob dropped to his knees, tears stinging his eyes. His lantern sputtered out, leaving only the light of the shard. His chest heaved, his heart pounded, his body trembled beneath the weight of unseen chains. He knew then, whatever this was, it was no treasure of men, no gold or silver. It was something older, darker, greater, and it had chosen him. Jacob Miller stumbled out of the tunnel as if pursued by the devil himself. The shard in his hand burned with cold fire, refusing to dim even beneath the pale wash of the moon. He slammed the hatch shut with shaking arms, the iron handle rattling like the last note of a hymn gone wrong. For a long moment, he leaned against the splintering wall of the abandoned house, chest heaving, eyes fixed on the darkness he had left behind. The world outside felt altered, as though the very air knew what he carried. The cicadas were silent. The wind held its breath. The moon shone weak and far away, paling before the light of the crystal wrapped in his torn shirt. Jacob pressed it to his chest, hiding it as one might shield a child. He hurried home across the brittle fields, his boots striking the dirt in rhythm with his racing heart. More than once he looked over his shoulder, half convinced the whisper would take shape and follow him out of the night. By the time he reached the farmhouse, the animals stirred nervously. The roosters crowed though dawn was hours away, their cries jagged and restless. The old hound by the porch whimpered low, tail tucked. Jacob hushed them as he slipped through the door, careful not to wake Mary. She lay in the bed, fragile as candle wax, her breath shallow, her hands limp across the quilt. Jacob knelt beside her, and with trembling hands unwrapped the shard. Its glow spilled softly across her face. Mary stirred, her eyelids fluttered, and for the first time in weeks, a faint flush of color warmed her cheeks. She whispered, voice weak but alive, "Jacob, is that light?" Tears blurred his sight. He held the crystal nearer. Mary's breathing steadied, her lips curling faintly into a smile before sleep reclaimed her. Jacob clutched the shard tighter, his heart torn between awe and fear, but miracles walk hand in hand with danger. The following morning, neighbors began to notice. Jacob, once bent by despair, now carried himself differently. His eyes, once clouded, bore a spark. He walked into town to buy bread, paying with coins no one remembered giving him. The grocer swore he saw a glow beneath Jacob's coat as he reached for his pocket. "Strange things follow strange men," muttered the blacksmith, shaking his head. By the end of the week, whispers filled the town like smoke. Children spoke of lights seen on Jacob's land at night. Wives told each other that Mary was recovering, though no doctor had visited. Rumor spread quickly, faster than fire through wheat, and soon it reached ears that did not let whispers lie. Sheriff Caldwell arrived one afternoon, boots heavy on Jacob's porch, eyes sharp as razors. His mustache bristled as he leaned against the doorframe. "Jacob," he said slowly, "folks say you've been meddling where no man should, out by the Halloway place." Jacob stiffened, his fingers curling tight against the wood. "I don't know what you mean." The sheriff's eyes narrowed. "The Halloway house ain't just some ruin. People died there. People went missing. And now you come back with your wife healed and coins in your pocket?" He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "What did you find, Miller?" Jacob swallowed, his throat dry as the cracked soil outside. "Ain't nothing there but dust." Behind him, Mary coughed. The faint glow of the shard tucked under her pillow seeped into the dim room. The sheriff's eyes flicked toward it, suspicion hardening into hunger. He straightened. "I'll be back," he said coldly. "And when I come, you best have answers." When his horse's hooves faded into the distance, Jacob dropped to his knees. He pressed his face into his hands. He had prayed for salvation, but what he had found was something darker, something that drew greed from every gaze. That night, Jacob sat alone by the fire. The shard lay on the table, glowing softly, casting long shadows that danced across the walls. Its light seemed alive, as if it were watching him. He wrestled within himself, bury it and be free, or keep it and risk all. Yet as he glanced toward Mary's peaceful face, he knew the truth. He could not give it up. The door creaked. Jacob spun, fists clenched. A tall figure stepped inside, hat in hand. Samuel Grady, his neighbor, his friend, stood there, hollow-eyed from hunger, his gaze fixed on the shard. "You can't keep it, Jacob," Samuel said, his voice quivering. Jacob rose slowly, heart pounding. "How long you been watching me?" "Long enough," Samuel whispered. "My wife coughs blood. My children starve. If that thing heals, if it feeds, it belongs to all of us." Jacob's chest tightened. Samuel's pain mirrored his own, yet he could not surrender the shard. He thought of Mary's fragile smile, the color in her cheeks. Without it, she would fade. With it, she might live. "You don't understand," Jacob whispered, voice breaking. "It chose me." Samuel's face twisted, torn between grief and fury. "Then it cursed you." He turned, slamming the door behind him, leaving Jacob trembling in the glow. Days blurred into nights. Whispers grew louder. Strangers prowled near the farm after dark. The pastor came, urging Jacob to confess before God. But Jacob plowed his fields by day and guarded the shard by night, its whispers becoming clearer, more insistent. It told him to return, to go deeper, to embrace the destiny waiting in the shadows. One evening, with Mary sleeping soundly for the first time in months, Jacob wrapped the shard and slipped back into the night. The abandoned house loomed, black against the stars. The hatch groaned open. The stair yawned wide. The tunnel breathed its chill once more, and Jacob descended, lantern in one hand, destiny in the other. The tunnel swallowed Jacob Miller like a throat of stone. His lantern's flame fluttered nervously, a small yellow heart beating against the dark, while the shard in his pocket glowed with a colder, steadier light. He moved deeper, boots scraping along the damp steps, breath fogging in faint bursts. The symbols on the walls, circles intersecting with jagged lines, seemed brighter than before, as if they had been waiting for his return and were waking now to greet him. At the base, the passage widened. Jacob paused to listen. No wind, no water, no scurrying rats. Only a silence so complete it pressed against the eardrums. He advanced, the lantern casting trembling arcs across the carved stone. The place where the rotted chest had rested was a scab of dust and darker stains. The chest itself, and the bones it held, were gone, as if the earth had inhaled them. His throat went dry. He forced himself forward. From the far wall, a seam of light opened. A hairline split in the stone, then widened with a grinding, ancient groan. Jacob's lantern flickered in the draft that rushed out, stale air exhaling the weight of years. The crack became a doorway, the doorway a throat, and then he stood at the lip of a cavern so vast his lantern could not find its edges. He stepped through. The ceiling rose into blackness. Pillars of rock climbed up like petrified trees, their trunks carved with the same runes he had followed from the surface. What the lantern did touch came forward in fragments. A broken bowl, an iron ring set into a slab, a row of low altars disappearing into dark. Upon them rested offerings turned to dust, melted candles, cracked jars, coins so old they looked like shadows of metal, and bones, not scattered but arranged, as if some ritual had required order even in death. Small rib cages nested inside larger ones, skulls placed in crescents, femurs balanced like pale bridges. The sight buckled Jacob's knees. He reached for the nearest pillar to steady himself. The shard in his pocket answered with a pulse. Light gathered in the center of the cavern, not from his lantern, not from the shard, but from something else, something bound within a great circle etched into the floor. Jacob approached against his will, as though his boots understood what his mind refused to accept. He saw it then. A figure of light lay within the circle, shackled by chains of shadow that hissed and quivered like serpents. It did not have a single shape. It turned and shifted, sometimes a man with outstretched hands, sometimes a stag with antlers of fire, sometimes a storm of wings, each form dissolving into the next, a universe of faces flickering inside a single captive glow. The chains tightened with each transformation, tightening again, biting deeper. Jacob's stomach knotted. Whatever this was, it had power. Power enough to bend shapes, power enough to lure the desperate. The voice came without sound. "You carry what is mine." The words fell directly into his blood. Jacob staggered. "What are you?" His own voice scraped the hollow air. "Name is a garment men wear. I am what waits and what remembers. Return the shard, and the hunger that gnaws your house will be fed. The debts you fear will crumble like ash. Death will retreat from your door." Mary's face rose before him, young again, laughing as she once had in wheat that no longer grew. The ache of that memory nearly split him. He took the shard out. Its cold light swelled, a pale star cupped in his palm. The chains around the figure trembled, loosening just enough to make him see how close freedom might be. The runes in the floor flared, each line a glowing wound. Heat rose from the circle. Jacob felt it on his face, a fevered prayer pressing for an amen. "What price?" Jacob asked. "There's always a price. Only what has always been owed," the voice said, gentler now, like a hymn remembered from childhood. "Balance. What was given must be given again. The land will flourish. Your wife will heal. Your name will ring with plenty. Bring the shard. Place it here." The light figure tilted its head. In its shifting body, Jacob thought he saw a familiar outline. Just an instant. A woman's spiral of hair. A child's small hand. He blinked hard. The images melted. Jacob stepped toward the circle and stopped inches from the etched rim. The glow soaked into his boots, up his legs, along his spine. He could lay the shard down. He could end this ceaseless ache, this scraping hunger. He could bring rain to his fields and laughter back to his house. A trickle of sound came from the darkness behind him. Dripping water, a bird's flutter? No, it was memory. The chest, the tiny skulls, the perfect, terrible arrangement of bones. He looked down. On the far side of the circle, half hidden beneath a veil of dust, lay a ribbon, a child's ribbon, faded blue, carefully tied. as if placed there in offering. Jacob's hand shook. The shard flared brighter, sensing the nearness of its rest. The chains around the figure groaned, stretching, shivering in anticipation. "Who paid before me?" Jacob asked, voice low. "Whose children? Whose mothers?" The cavern replied with silence. But the light figure changed again, not to a man or a beast, but to a shape that suggested a harvest. Tall stalks bowed under impossible grain, a river fat with fish, a barn full to bursting. Mary's smile burned on the inside of his eyelids. The pulse of the shard thudded in his palm. "Give it," the voice urged. "End your famine. End your fear." Jacob lifted the shard higher. Heat surged from the circle, eager, greedy, and in that same beat a chill cut through the heat, a memory sharp as a blade. Sheriff Caldwell's eyes when he glimpsed the shard's glow under Mary's pillow. Samuel Grady's trembling voice. Then it cursed you. The pastor's warnings. The neighbor's whispers. The prowling strangers in the night made foreign by rumor. Blessings that demand blood are not blessings, Jacob whispered. The cavern flinched. The chains rattled hard enough to ring. "You speak like a man who has never held a dying wife." The voice hissed now, currents of shadow tensing. "You speak like a man who believes the sky will save him." "I've held a dying wife," Jacob said, tears brightening the dust on his cheeks. "I've prayed under a sky that would not open. But I won't feed you to make it rain." The circle erupted. The floor cracked like thunder. Chains snapped tight, then lunged outward, seeking his wrists, his throat, the shard. Jacob stumbled back, almost dropping the lantern. The flame blew out, leaving only the shard's white glare and the hateful gleam of the runes. "Then you will carry it," the voice roared. Not a voice now, but a storm. A torrent shoved down his lungs. "You will bear the hunger of the earth. You will guard what binds me until it hollows you. You have chosen the burden over the feast." Shadows unfurled from the rune lines and wrapped his legs. Jacob lurched free, skidding across grit. The shard scorched his palm, branding heat into bone. He clutched it tighter, not as tribute, not as gift, but as lock and key together. If it would not be returned, it must be kept. He ran. The cavern bucked like a living beast. Pillars shivered. Altars toppled, sending centuries of dust into the air in choking waves. The chains dragged along the stone like anchors. The figure within the circle exploded into a storm of faces and eyes and wings, a spinning galaxy that made him dizzy to watch. "Carry it, carry it, carry it," the storm screamed, the words turning into broken laughter. Jacob's shoulder slammed a wall. He pushed off and found the tunnel throat again by memory and terror. The floor pitched. The ceiling cracked overhead and a rain of pebbles stung his scalp. He clawed for the stair, blind but for the shard's glare that painted every surface in winter light. He climbed. The stair rose forever, each step a mile, each breath a scrape. Behind him the roar squeezed through the stone, a trapped ocean hammering a door. "You chose the burden. You will not put it down." The words chased him like wolves. His hands found the hatch. He shoved. It stuck. He shoved again, cursing, praying, heaving with everything the fields had left in him. Wood screamed. The hatch burst open. Cold night air knifed his lungs. Jacob tumbled onto the ruined floor of the house above and kicked the hatch shut. It slammed like a coffin lid. For several heartbeats he lay sprawled on the boards listening to the sudden quiet. The roar below dimmed into a faint, hateful hum. The shard burned in his grip, then subsided to a steady throb. He got to his knees. He was shaking from head to heel, sweat and dust turning to paste on his skin. He pressed his ear to the hatch. Nothing, only the softest shiver, like a beast pacing in a distant cage. He wrapped the shard in his torn shirt and staggered into the night. The fields accepted him without a word. Stars had gathered while he was underground. Cold fires pinned to a high black quilt. Jacob walked with the slow, stunned steps of a man returning from his own grave. At the fence line he stopped and retched dryly, body trying to empty fear it could not name. Then he kept going, because there was nothing else to do, and because Mary was waiting. When he reached the farmhouse, the old hound whined but did not bark. Jacob slipped inside and sat on the edge of the bed. Mary stirred. In the dark, her face was a pale moon. He unwrapped the shard just enough to let a breath of light touch her cheek. She sighed, a sound like a child sinking into sleep, and the tightness around her eyes eased. Jacob closed the cloth again and held the bundle to his chest. "I said no," he whispered to the room, to the fields, to the sky that had withheld rain and mercy. And it said I must carry it. The house creaked in the wind. The shard throbbed like a second heart. Jacob leaned back in the chair and let the exhaustion take him, not into rest but into a thin place between waking and nightmare, where chains rattled and children's ribbons lay in dust. Before sleep closed his eyes, he spoke once more, to the only listener he believed might be listening. I will carry it. I'll keep it from every hungry hand. I'll keep it from myself. Outside, the night held. Far away, beneath the ruined house, something shifted its weight against its prison and smiled without a mouth. Inside, Mary's breathing deepened. The shard's glow pulsed once, as if in acknowledgement. Whatever bargain had been offered, whatever curse had been laid, Jacob Miller had chosen his answer, and the true cost of that choice had only begun. The nights that followed were restless. Jacob Miller sat often by the window of his farmhouse, the shard glowing faintly in his hands, its cold light cutting through the dark. Mary's strength grew by the day, her cheeks no longer pale, her laughter slowly returning. To the eyes of any neighbor, it seemed a miracle, but Jacob knew better. He had seen the cavern. He had heard the voice chained in shadow. The land around him remained barren, yet inside his home life flickered back, and that was the cruelest part. Each smile from Mary, each gentle word she whispered weighed heavier on his conscience. He had refused to release the being in the cavern, but in keeping the shard, had he already sealed a different kind of pact? Sometimes, when the wind howled across the fields, Jacob heard it again, the voice faint but sharp, reminding him of the choice he had made. You will carry it, until it consumes you. The words echoed in his chest like a curse, and yet, Jacob did not run. He could not. For the first time in years, Mary lived. For the first time, his prayers seemed answered. Perhaps that was the fate of men like him, to bear the burden, to suffer silently so others might breathe easier. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the fields in gold, Jacob stood at the edge of his land. He held the shard high, watching its pale light fight against the colors of dusk. It was not wealth, it was not freedom, it was a burden, but within that burden, he found purpose. He whispered into the wind, I will guard it, for her, for them, as long as I breathe. The whisper inside him quieted, not gone, not silenced, but subdued. Jacob turned back toward his home, shoulders heavy but steps steady. He was still a poor farmer. His fields were still cracked and dry. His debt still hung like chains. But within his walls lived hope, and that was more than the world had given him in a long time. The abandoned house stood silent in the distance, its secret sealed once more. Perhaps others would come, drawn by whispers of treasure or miracle. Perhaps the curse would test him again. But for now, Jacob knew his place. He was not chosen for wealth. He was not chosen for glory. He was chosen to carry a secret, to guard it, and to bear the cost. And in that, there was a strange kind of grace. Because sometimes the greatest blessings are not the ones that free us, but the ones that bind us to something greater than ourselves. Jacob Miller's story reminds us that desperation can drive us into shadows, but faith can keep us from falling all the way through. That even when hope comes in the strangest of forms, we must be wise enough to see its cost. So as you leave this story tonight, remember, life often hides its greatest tests in the places we least expect, in abandoned houses, in broken hearts, in secrets buried beneath the dust of years. And sometimes the passage we fear to enter is the very one that shapes our destiny. If you felt Jacob's struggle, if you too believe that even the poorest among us can carry the heaviest of burdens with courage, then make sure you subscribe to this channel. Share this story with someone who needs to remember that hope can rise even in the darkest tunnels. And leave a comment telling me, if you had been Jacob standing at the mouth of that cavern, would you have released the chained figure or walked away? Because in the end, the answer to that question is not just Jacob's story, it is ours.